Welcome to the reality show, where we apply the philosophy of Ayn Rand to current events. Today's show, we have Marco and Richard with us, and we also have Matthew Humphreys, and I am Michael Leibowitz. So we have three pretty good topics today. There was a recent cyber attack on MGM Resorts, and we'll be discussing that. We'll also be discussing the British experience with the National Health Service. And a list has come out of the 750 best companies, so we'll also discuss that. So what do you guys think about cyber attacks? Are they a serious threat, and what can we do about them?
Well, I can kick off this if you like.
Sure.
Essentially, it's just stealing in another form, isn't it? It's still cheating and stealing other people out of money. It doesn't matter whether it happens online or whether it happens by raiding a jeweler's and taking all the jewelry in the front window. It's exactly the same principle. So I think it's always a bit dangerous when things are given some sort of mystique just because they're done in a different form. And particularly when it comes to, the Heist movie, for example, is a classic of this, because it kind of focuses on the planning of a heist, the division of labor, the teamwork, the skill set of the individuals, how it goes, the operation of it, and then the escape. But really, it's creating, the essential is still stealing at the end of it. And so I think it's dangerous to give it too much credit beyond that.
Yeah, it's a new form of criminality, which in a way betrays how cowardly the criminals are, because they can exploit the anonymity coming from using the internet, and especially viciously they exploit not only systems vulnerability, which we know are there, and they are also fairly easy to address, but also they exploit, if you like, the goodwill of people or the carelessness of people. There was a case where a security advisor dropped on purpose a USB key outside a building that he was auditing, and lo and behold, somebody picked it up and stuck it straight away in the computer of the company. And those kind of behaviors are really, really dangerous. If actually, if the USB had been from a party who wanted to cause a harm, it would have probably downloaded some sort of dodgy software. So all these kind of things is a different approach to security we have to take. It's no longer lock your doors. It's be careful of what you do online.
Matthew, what do you think?
Well, there's a lot more awareness of these kind of issues, certainly within my profession, the legal profession in England. Over the last few years, hasn't happened to any of the firms I've worked at, but we have heard of law firms actually being cyber attacked, and either email addresses being sort of hijacked, and clients being asked to transfer money to, thinking it's the firm's account, being asked to transfer money to the hacker's bank account. We've actually had a situation where one of my colleagues somehow managed to download malware onto their computer, and the next time they logged in, they were greeted by a message telling them all their data is encrypted, and they were basically attempting to blackmail them into transferring a huge amount in Bitcoin in order to give them the decryption key. We thankfully had very good backup procedures in place, and were effectively able to tell the hackers to go swivel and just basically completely reformat the drive in that device, because any data which would have been on there was actually backed up to a secure server system, and we were able to just reformat the device without risking losing any data. But yeah, it is clearly becoming a big problem.
But what can be done about it, if anything?
Well, better security and better awareness, I think, are by the individual users. I think is all we can do, really. I mean, the example you were giving a moment ago of someone deliberately leaving a USB drive accessible to see if anyone would plug it in. I mean, we've had similar things done in our firm to test security. Nothing quite like that, but we've had a essentially what they did was send a message around from a spoofed email address purporting to be a third party acting on behalf of the firm, encouraging people to use their firm network login details to log into a third party website. And it was all a big sort of, I don't want to say setup, but it was basically a very elaborate test by the firm's IT security people to see if anyone would actually sort of fall for that if someone tried to do it for real.
I think one of the things you've got to tackle in terms of trying to combat this is some of the incompetence that and lack of focus that people who work for companies have, which is often, it's not the cause, but it's sometimes exacerbated by a working from home culture at the moment, and the need to have staff double check each other's work. For example, a recent massive data breach in Northern Ireland occurred because there was a freedom of information request, as it's called, to the police force there to get some top level data about how many staff there were working in the police force. It might have been a journalist asking it or something similar, or just a private individual. And instead of receiving just that top information, they received an entire spreadsheet, entire Excel spreadsheet of all the details with names, ranks, locations of all the police staff across the whole of Northern Ireland, which also went online because all of these are put immediately in the public domain, all these responses. And of course, that becomes an instant threat, particularly in Northern Ireland, where dissident Republicans are keen to use such information for terrorist purposes. And that simply comes out of a lack of focus for the person replying to an email, who doesn't focus on what they're doing, doesn't pick up the right document, isn't checked by a colleague before it goes out, and it's too late once they've hit send and it's out in the world.
I'm just wondering if we should clarify what we mean by Irish Republicans for the American audience.
Sure. Do you want to?
It's essentially so Ireland for about a century has basically been split into the Republic of Ireland, which is independent, and Northern Ireland, which were 6 counties of Ireland who decided when Ireland became independent that they wanted to separate and retain links with Britain rather than become independent as part of the Irish Republic. There's been decades of problems arising from that, and dissident Republicans are groups who have broken away from what we call the IRA, the big terrorist organization who were trying to force Britain out of Northern Ireland, and these groups have sort of broken away and are starting to cause problems and violence again.
Including doing things such as putting car bombs under individual staff's cars. And obviously a list like the one I'm talking about would be particularly useful to someone attempting to do that.
Yeah. Of course, there's also, I think where the second article we're looking at, that has got to be more international, if you like, a kata of it. There was an attack linked to North Korea, which effectively nearly resulted in the central bank of Bangladesh to transfer funds to a illegitimate account to effectively the hackers who managed to put some software in the systems and were able to divert the funds through different dodgy companies in different dodgy countries to make it less likely to track it. The thing did actually was stopped by accident, by a fluke. Didn't succeed, but some of the money was already transferred, so they struggled to get it back.
And we're talking about a sum where they nearly got away with $1 billion.
Yeah.
From the Bangladesh central bank. In the end, they managed 81 million, and of course this goes to North Korea with the help of China as ever.
Yeah, I mean, every time North Korea is involved, it makes you wonder, well, can they really do that? Do they really have the capability to do that, or they're being helped by their neighbors? Yeah. Who knows? But you can only speculate.
And one of the things that they do with North Koreans who are really good at school, good at mathematics and computing, is take them out at an early age, take them to China and train them on how to hack. So that, if you imagine what a wasted productivity talent there is in taking the best of the country's youth and using it for such, nefarious purposes.
I'm very new to the internet, so I know little to nothing about cyber crimes. But I get a funny thing happened to me when I first got out of prison. I was on the computer, and all of a sudden, this thing comes on my computer and says, "We have locked down your computer. We're Microsoft. You've been attacked with all these viruses, and if you want to fix this, you must call this number right away." And I'm panicking. I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm getting hit by these viruses." And I call the number and the lady's guiding me through. You need to do this. You need to do this. And then at the end of this, she says, "Okay, this is going to require a special security thing. And we're going to need," I think she said $500. And right then I said, "Oh," I said, "You're the scam artist." And then ultimately I figured out what to do. Then the next time this happened, I know it's a scam. So I called the guy and I said, "Okay, listen, I just want to fix this. Just tell me how much money you're going to need. You need $1,000, $2,000, whatever it's going to be. Just tell me, I'll wire it right to you. We'll get this fixed." And then after a while, I'd let him on. "Listen, I know it's a scam. See you later." And it's only happened once or twice since then, but it was a lesson to me about being careful of what you see on the computer.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But that's exactly what's vicious about it. That's why older people tend to fall for it, because the scammers, like scammers do, tend to leverage on the good nature of the people who they aim as victims, and of course, they get away with it most of the time because.
Yeah, and at country level, it operates on a similar level, really, doesn't it? And it's just a shame that countries like North Korea are essentially, their only way to succeed is to drag other countries down, to drag the other guy down to make yourself look better. So sometimes it's intended with attacks on things like the NHS or other institutions is to make the West look worse rather than to extract money from it necessarily. But the aim is to be destructive.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting how usually I haven't seen the statistic, but my guess is that public body are probably more likely to be attacked and successfully attacked than private companies. I'm sure that, especially here in Britain, if there is an attack, chances are it's on a government service or website or something like that, because of course there is less skin in the game if you work for the state. So.
Interestingly, I've just had something flash up on my news ticker that the company which produces the identification for Greater Manchester Police has just been hacked. So not clear exactly what's happened. It's just breaking as we speak, as far as I can tell. But essentially it looks like the identities and photographs of GMP officers have been seized by cyber attackers.
What are GNP offices?
Oh, sorry, Greater Manchester Police.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Anyone have anything else they want to add about this?
Well, I think I just wanted to add that my point about the mystique earlier is how we seem to, when you read stories about this kind of thing, and they're talking about people hacking, there seems to be an enormous awe of the talent of the hacker that is not treated the same way when the same talent of somebody who's, talented at computers uses it for good purposes. Then they're treated as a geek or somebody boring and dull, and whereas it's only when they use it for dodgy purposes they're suddenly given this Ocean's 11 style mystique, which is
once again the media reports something from North Korea with a really sycophantic way, and treating them like they're the heroes of the story, using words like, the guys are stealing money, and they use words like, oh, the big payday for the hackers. It's like, payday? Really? They're stealing money, yeah? Remember that. And then they use things like, oh, if they didn't go for that particular bank, that particular choice costed them a few millions. It's like, again, they're not earning money illegally, they're stealing money. So, and there is this kind of underlying sense that the little country is a poor country, so it feels like they're kind of legitimizing the fact that, they're poor, they're trying to make enough money to survive, when they evaded throughout the article the fact that, they're poor because they are a communist dictatorship where the big fat head of the state seems to be eating all the food that is around. So it's this continuous underlying poor person, little person, good, big company, big whatever is bad. It's just really, really getting widespread.
I got to ask, what does dodgy mean?
What's a synonym for dodgy? Dubious. To be questioned. Yes. Dubious towards the negative. Shady. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to start employing this term. I like it.
It's
sure are dodgy, pal. I like that. I think
it's always a surprise which words are new to you guys or us. Yeah.
Well, I'm the only Yankee on the panel here, so everybody else knows. All right. As the only Yankee here, I'm not subject to the National Health Service in Britain, but
that's
evidently it's true. But evidently more and more people are becoming dissatisfied with the National Health Service. More waiting lines, I guess, lack of good care. First of all, are all of you subject to the National Health Service?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can't escape it.
Okay, so what has been your experience with it, and why is this coming up, you think, now? Where why does this keep happening, where there's these waiting periods and people aren't getting the care they need? All right, Matthew, I got a call on you. I feel like I'm running a group. I used to run groups in prison. You ask a question and no one answers, and you're like, "Uh-oh, what do you do?"
I'm possibly going to rock the boat slightly and say my one main big experience with the NHS was just a couple of years ago. I had a really nasty bout of COVID, typically just before all the vaccinations came out. And after that, although I recovered from the COVID, I actually developed quite a serious medical issue. I actually still have a heart condition, which was somehow set off apparently by the COVID. But I ended up in hospital for, I think, about 2.5 weeks, trying to get all this sorted out. And I have to say, actually, my experience was pretty good. They looked after me, sorted out the sort of immediate issue, and got me onto the right medication, and I'm still here. Obviously, that's one person's experience, and clearly things are going wrong elsewhere in the service. It's underfunded. The doctors, or certainly junior doctors and nurses, are not happy with having not received pay rises for however many years, and they're all periodically going on strike. Waiting lists, irrespective of what my experience was, waiting lists are getting longer. We do have all of these stories coming out, as in the newspaper article that was shared with all of us, where there seems to be this list of people who've had quite serious problems and misdiagnosis. So clearly it's very far from being a perfect system. It seems to have become almost this sort of sacred cow in UK politics that, you know, not even the Conservative Party will try and actually, well, they won't criticise the principle of the NHS. They talk about trying to make it more efficient, not very successfully, it seems, because it's perennially the same old problems. But for someone to actually suggest privatisation or some sort of serious significant reform of the system is just viewed as almost unthinkable, it seems to me.
Yeah. Well, I personally take issue on the underfunded business, because 50% or just over 50% of the whole expenditure of the UK government, which is massive, goes to the NHS. I think the NHS gets like 80 billion a year budget. So I wouldn't call it underfunded at all. If you want to say that it's misspent, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, funny enough, they still find the money to hire diversity inclusion managers for healthcare. It's like, the sniffles will actually look at the demographics before hitting. Come on, like, get over it.
And often they say it's understaffed as well, which is equally ludicrous, because on any list of the largest companies in the world, the NHS appears about 5th or 6th, depending on the list. So companies like, places like the Chinese Army, the Chinese Railway, people who work for McDonald's, people who work for Walmart, and 5th, people who work for the British Healthcare Service is their largest number of employees. This is a country with 67 million people in it, and you've got about 1.7 million working for the health service. I mean, it's quite nutty. But the way the British react to the NHS service and the sacred cow and the aspect of it is very hard to describe to Americans. So I've got some examples here of some of the nuttiness of the British towards the NHS, okay? So bear with me whilst I give you some comedy examples of what we do to celebrate our health service. In the 2012 Olympics, we had a special section in the opening ceremony to celebrate the health service, with children jumping up and down on beds, for example, in the middle of the stadium, because it's such an important part of the national identity. Now, this year is the 75th birthday of the NHS, and it's called a birthday as if it's a trusted member of the family. And all sorts of things have happened to celebrate this birthday, including minting special coins and stamps, thanks services at Westminster Abbey for religious services to say thank you for the NHS that we all pay for. They've lit up buildings in blue, including the Houses of Parliament, to celebrate it. At music festivals like Glastonbury, they've read poems to the crowds of people gathered to hear, Adele or whoever sing to celebrate the NHS. Tom Hardy did a little children's story to the nation's children to tell them all about why the NHS was wonderful. The NHS has its own flag. I mean, it's so important. It's almost a country. It's got its own rainbow flag, and children are encouraged to draw little rainbow pictures and put them in the window saying, "Thank you, NHS," all the time. So it's a crazy situation.
The problem is that there are probably more admin people than there are clinical staff. I mean, generally, the care given is not that bad, to be fair. Of course, there are cases where there are mismanagement and stuff missed, because, as Matthew said, we, especially after COVID, or when nobody did anything for a year and a half roughly, we found ourselves with a massive backlog of people who couldn't be treated at the time because of the lockdowns. And one of the issues, I think, is that healthcare seems to be treated as a series of silos. The knowledge across the various disciplines seems to be in existence. So when you go, for example, to somebody who specializes in gastric or bowel intestine stuff, they don't seem to think about, funny enough, about what you eat. So the treatment is always very specific. There's no, if you like, sideways integration across other aspects of the subject. This is quite weird. That's why I think an AI will be a much better and efficient way to provide the service that a GP provides, because it would have a much wider view and knowledge of the whole field of medicine.
Because the patient experience is really quite different from all of this stuff. Because just to give you an example, if you've got something where you need to phone your local doctor, your local general practitioner, you've got two choices. You either phone and then you get an appointment in like 3 weeks. And if you've got a cough or something, that's not much use to you, 3 weeks' time. But if you actually want an appointment like the following day, what everybody has to do is phone their local GP surgery at 8 a.m. in the morning. They're all told to phone at exactly the same time. So obviously the phones all go nuts at 8 o'clock in the morning. You can't get through, so you have to keep redialing. You're hopefully then in a queue, and hopefully there's enough appointments left by the time they answer your call before they've run out for the day, and you're told, "I'm sorry, you'll have to phone at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning." Do the same again. I mean, you wouldn't run any business that way, would you? And certainly the idea that you would run a private healthcare that way, it just shows what a dire situation it is. But what you're always told here in Britain is that the NHS is the envy of the world, that everybody admires this service more than that, which is why we include it in our Olympic ceremony. And that tends to feed into a sense of arrogance within the service itself, which can actually impact on patient care, because some of the staff can think that you should be grateful for this marvelous service, so you shouldn't question the medical opinion. And that's why in some of these cases, like in the case of this little girl called Martha, who fell off her bike, injured her pancreas in the fall, went into hospital, was treated for the injury, but very badly, ended up getting sepsis and dying as a result of it. And the whole point was that her parents were constantly telling the medical staff what was wrong with her and that she wasn't well, and they were constantly being told back again that she was perfectly fine and the doctors knew what they were doing. That's the kind of arrogance that tends to be built in. And what they're suggesting now, as Martha's Law, is that there should be the right to a second opinion. And all this is saying that you should have more of the same. You had a dysfunctional service offering you a poor opinion in the first place. So the answer is to have more medical staff offering you a second poor opinion as a solution. What kind of solution is that?
To me, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go on.
To me, there's two big problems with socialized healthcare, or socialized anything really. First is the moral problem that inevitably some people end up paying for other people to go to the doctor. That's never a good thing. It necessarily relies on the theft of people's money in order to pay for other people. And then there's also the economics of it. And I've often in this debate given an analogy that what if all of a sudden the government were to announce that personal computers or laptops, I guess is what they are now, or iPhones, let's say iPhones, were going to be given away for free, what would happen? Well, everybody would run out to get an iPhone. And the people that make iPhones, now that they're not making profit, would soon stop making iPhones. And what are you going to end up with? Waiting lines, long waiting lines. It just doesn't work economically, and it's immoral. So I guess I do. People accept bad economics and bad moral standards and bad moral principles. That's how this type of stuff comes about. But it's easy for me to say and to understand on an abstract level the idea of these waiting lines. But what is it like actually when you need to get to the doctor? I guess it's more with electives that you end up waiting. I'm not sure. But so how does that actually work in practice?
Well, if you have an emergency, like you have an accident or you have a heart attack, stuff like that, the emergency care is actually quite good. You generally get an ambulance, and in a few minutes you're at the hospital, whisked out, and all the tests and all the stuff. It's done, and chances are to save your life. It's not a death trap. When you're there, actually the care is there. The issue is if you got, as you said, elective surgeries or elective medicine, or you want to call your doctor that got sudden headache, you want to go and speak to the doctor, that might take much longer. That's why people tend, if they have an issue they're worried about, tend to go to A&E, and of course, accident and emergency. What's it called? ER. And that's what can cause a clogging of the system there. But generally, if you need something which is not emergency, it could take weeks. I mean, they seem to work at 6 weeks at a time. Every time you go to the GP, you book an appointment with a specialist, and it's about 6 weeks wait, and then now 6 weeks for something else, depending on the urgency. The issue also is that because it's state provided, people that actually don't pay directly out of their pocket, they tend to book appointments with the GP, and then they don't turn up. And of course, the GPs, the general practitioners, don't charge you for that, because that will be seen as
sacrilege.
Sacrilege, absolutely. So that compounds the problem, and we seem to be having an issue with non-residents or people who are not even British that tend to come over here for certain surgeries because it's the staff don't ask for any entitlement whether you can get the care.
I think one of the other areas that's particularly poor is the cancer side of things, because there's a lot of diagnostics to work out whether you've got a cancer or where it is or what type it is and that kind of stuff. Is all of those built-in delays that Marco was talking about, all the 6 weeks here and 6 weeks there. You go for a test, it'll be 6 weeks before you get a letter saying what the result of the test was, and then another 6 weeks before they'll see you again to look at it in more detail. And all of this builds in, a delay to what could be a cancerous growth taking over more of your body while you're caught in this bureaucratic net. So the reason that people go private and pay on top to have something looked at is normally to speed up that process. It's not that they're going to see a different doctor or a different surgeon, because they're often the same surgeon that works in the NHS and also does some days a week working privately, but that they operate the list differently so that you can effectively jump the queue. But what you're doing is you're paying twice over. You're paying once as the taxpayer for the whole service to be inefficient and useless, and then you're paying again when you actually need it to really get the service you need. And of course, it's just doubly inefficient.
And the state provided healthcare means that the private sector, the little private healthcare that we have in Britain, is actually strangled by the monopoly of the state. These guys could never make a living by providing 24/7 private care, because they need to work in the NHS in order to provide the private care. There's not enough demand for private care. What was I saying?
I think one other aspect I wanted to mention on this was the personal responsibility aspect, because you've got a free at the point of youth health service. It gives a lot of people license to treat their bodies really badly. to eat, drink, smoke, behavioral lifestyle issues that then cause health problems, and then expect an injection from the NHS to help you lose weight, or surgery on the NHS. All of those kind of things take place.
We've got a super chat from Maribins for $5. And it says, emergency care is going to get worse in the UK. If chronic conditions like diabetic foot neuropathy go untreated, more falls happen. Guys, I've got to ask. I want all three of you to chime in on this. How in the heck does something like a government-run health program turn into, like, it sounds like it's like a religion over there? Like, how did that happen? That's crazy.
Absolutely. Little old ladies knit little woolen hats to put on red post boxes to say happy birthday NHS. I mean, it's they have cake parties. One of the things the NHS themselves suggested was that you eat cake and biscuits in a party to celebrate the NHS. How is that good for your health, to be encouraged to eat cake and biscuits?
Well, the healthcare is free. What difference does it make?
We've lost the plot. We've completely lost the plot.
Matthew, what do you think about this religious aspect of it?
Well, I mean, historically, obviously, it was founded in the aftermath of World War II, you know, and the Allies had supposedly just scored this huge victory, crushed the evil of fascism and Nazism, and it all comes out of that kind of moment that we were founding the sort of first proper welfare state in the Western world, and we've never really quite got out of that kind of mentality. It was just viewed as this special, unique British institution that, you know, everybody's looked after from the cradle to the grave, as they've kind of dropped that, but that used to be the kind of NHS mantra, that everybody's looked after from birth up until the moment they die. And I guess we've never really got out of that kind of mentality. It's just never been challenged, and the politicians, the people who could do something about it, are actually, well, either genuinely support it or seem to be afraid to sort of speak up and actually come up with proper proposals for challenging it, because they think they're going to be unpopular with the voters. And it's kind of a catch-22 almost.
I think that's certainly interesting. Defeat tyranny, implement socialism. Like, what the hell's going on? All right. Does anybody have anything they want to add about this subject?
I don't just mention, I don't know whether it's because the UK is such a secular country, and that there is such a low level of religion, and we have such an altruistic culture, that the NHS ends up taking the place of a church and acting like a bit of a religion. It's got all the trappings of it. It's got like an origin story and annual celebrations, and yes, it's nuts.
It's nutty. Absolutely. I knew a little about it. I didn't know about this whole like celebrating it in tea parties and whatnot. Okay. So the last topic, the 750 companies, the greatest companies put out by Times. What'd you guys think of this?
Well, if I can not give financial advice, I would say don't invest in any of the first 740 companies, because if their focus is actually how many women they've got, how many gays, how many people of various races they've got on the board and in the staff, perhaps you want to look somewhere else when you decide where to put your money.
Yeah, muddling the ESG stuff with how successful a company is and how much salaries they pay and all that kind of stuff. If you want to know what the most successful companies are in any country, look at the FTSE 100, look at the Nasdaq or the S&P 500. I mean, those are the most successful companies, aren't they? Do you need a separate list invented by a bunch of journalists that include countries in China that you aren't exactly going to accept your CV?
Yeah, I thought it was conspicuously absent from their criteria were profit and customer satisfaction. Like, how many women they got, how many carbon emissions, how nice the door greeter is, all kinds of stuff. Matthew, what did you think of it?
It's bizarre on a sort of woke set of criteria for sort of judging what makes a successful company. It's just really, I'm not sure what the sort of thought process was behind this, really. It's kind of
how happy the employees are, right?
I don't think there was much thought involved, to be honest. I think number 8, it's EDF, it's Électricité de France. It's a energy company which is 100% owned by the government, French government. And so how did the one fare on the shareholder side? It's like
they're 100% happy. But yeah, I always find these lists, it doesn't matter what they are really, but the top 10 lists to blah, 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 whatever it is, just seems to be the top 10 things to think so that I don't have to. And people, it's a clickbaity thing. So you click on it, you scan down the list with vast indifference, and then you move on and you've learned nothing. I mean, apart from suggestions as to where to go on holiday or something like that, where you then explore the places as a possibility and make a decision, deciding your whole career based on the top 10 or top 750 or whatever, useless.
Yeah, if I come into money and I'm looking to invest, I'm not going with who hires the most female bosses. Like, I don't care. And as far as employee satisfaction, I mean, I think it's good to treat people kindly and to be nice to people, but I can't help but think about Seinfeld. I don't know how popular Seinfeld is across the pond, but when George Costanza, one of the characters, he worked for a company called Kruger Industrial Smoothing, and everybody loved it because the boss didn't care what they did. They weren't trying to make money. It's always party time. I'm not sure how profitable such a company would be, though.
Sounds like the NHS.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
A way to tie things together. That's awesome.
And I think one of the things that's always forgotten in these lists is the other option that's really underplayed, the idea of starting your own business, innovating for yourself, creating your own company. You don't necessarily have to join the biggest in order to be the biggest. You can create the biggest and be totally in control and create the kind of environment that you really want to work in. But of course, that takes some cojones.
Which the female bosses, I guess they don't have the cojones. Yeah,
that's changing.
I mean, it is, but I mean, it's just to me. I mean, it's comical to an extent, but it's also deeply disturbing because the implicit, assumptions that are involved here are that profit is not good, hard work is not important, doing the best you can, it's not important. It's all about meeting these woke criteria that the arbiters of good and bad, the self-appointed arbiters of good and bad, are putting out there. And I just wonder how many people read that and are like, oh wow, these are great companies, when there's no mention of profitability. That's just, it's absolutely absurd.
Well, to be fair, I wonder how many people like us take it seriously.
Not many. Well, nobody, I don't think so.
Who looks at that list and thinks, oh yeah, this really makes sense. I'm such an expert in the economy. I can tell immediately that because you plant 15 trees and you offset your carbon footprint or whatever, oh, you're gonna be a better company. It just doesn't exist. You can't force this kind of stuff on people.
And how are you going to decide who you work for? Isn't it surely based on the sector and the skill set and the opportunities and the innovation opportunities? And where is the company? Where do you want to live? Is that entirely based on who's the biggest, whether they're number 33 or number 34? Or, what about the weather, the political environment, the personal freedom of living there, the ease of visiting your family from there? All of that stuff is relevant, isn't it? So a list becomes just meaningless.
You didn't mention how much they give to charity. I don't know if I like your list.
Complete speculation by me, but if you did look at the most sort of financially successful companies and the people who are, high on the stock market and so forth, I suspect you would find the employees are generally very happy, have job satisfaction, and they have very, very satisfied customers.
And one of the really popular companies I work for here in the UK is Wetherspoons, isn't it? A pub company where even people who work behind the bar and in the kitchens, that kind of stuff, have share options and the chance to share in the profits. It's a listed company on the stock market. And I think that's a really good way of incentivizing your staff to want the whole business to do well and you to be a part of growing that business for the benefit of you, yourself, your other employees, and of course your customers.
Meanwhile, there's a big chain called John Lewis here. It's a big department stores. It used to be the pinnacle of shopping here in Britain till 10, 15 years ago. And when it suddenly decided to go woke, everything is for the environment or for the diversity or whatever. And today they're reported like a 56 million loss. They were virtually printing money until a few years ago. And now they decide to follow this clever direction, which turns out not to be very good for business.
I wouldn't think it would be. All right. Anybody have anything else they want to add to this topic?
No, all good.
All right. Well, I guess I'm good too. All right. Do we have any announcements? Daniel, what's happening here?
At 10 p.m. UK time, we have Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir on China and the real world out there.
Sounds great. And thanks everyone for joining us. And thank you guys. This has been really fun. It's been great.
Thank you.